Coming up next, we tell the story of a classic song bestowed upon a singer who was riding the wave of a #1 smash. In fact, it was the biggest song of the year, and he was set to follow up this big hit with today's song. However, when the singer's interpretation of the song was deemed unfit for popular consumption, the original creators took an unexpected turn and they erased his vocals completely. The rumor is he didn't find out about it until he heard the song on the radio. He was livid. However, the move transformed this song into one of the rock era's most iconic anthems and took this rookie band to superstardom. How the controversial artist who called himself the Wolf King betrayed the friendship of a fellow singer, and how his band, with so much promise, ruined it all before they even started. The story's coming up next on Professor of Rock. Hey music junkies, Professor of Rock, always here to celebrate the greatest artists and the greatest songs of all time. You know, if you remember those old Time Life commercials pushing their 60s, 70s, and 80s compilations, those collections, I love those commercials. You're gonna dig this channel of deep musical nostalgia. Make sure to subscribe right now so you don't miss out on our latest interviews and videos. Also, make sure to check us out on Patreon, where you can get additional content and it helps us keep it a daily channel. In the heart of the 1960s, a revolutionary wave of music charged across the American cultural landscape, expressing the sentiments of a generation yearning for change, peace, and a comfortable place in the sun. At the forefront of this renaissance were the Mamas and the Papas, a folk rock ensemble that not only captured the spirit of the times, they also carved their names in the tablets of rock history with the timeless, resonant anthem, today's song, California Dreamin'. California, California dreamin', on such a winter's day. John Phillips was a principal member of the folk trio The Journeymen, touring across California when he met a beautiful 18-year-old model in a San Francisco nightclub whose name was Michelle Gilliam. John, who was married to another woman at the time, was immediately smitten. The two had an affair, torrid affair, and they were married immediately after John's divorce from his first wife. As newlyweds, John and Michelle Phillips moved to New York City. They created the group The New Journeymen, and they began to write songs together. Being from the sunny palm tree utopia of Southern California, especially back in those days, Michelle was really a fish out of water in the Big Apple. She arrived in New York City, but she was completely unprepared for the piercing cold wind that blew through the streets of Manhattan in the wintertime. It was a cold winter that year. Michelle had no gloves, no hat, and definitely no scarves. The couple had only been in the city a few weeks when Michelle got really homesick. She just couldn't understand how anyone could live in such a cold climate, being from California. John often wrote songs about what was happening in his life or what was happening in the lives of the people around him. He had a propensity to write late at night. This happened sometimes while Michelle was sleeping nearby. So in the quiet confines of their room at the Earl Hotel in Manhattan during one of those late nights, while Michelle was peacefully sleeping, John softly strummed his guitar and initiated the creation of that song, California Dreamin'. All the leaves are brown, and the sky is gray. Earlier that day, the couple went out for a walk and it started to snow really heavily. Since it never snowed in Southern California, Michelle had never seen snow. She didn't know what that white stuff was that was falling from the sky. She was impressed. Michelle wasn't dressed for a winter's day, of course. She got cold really quickly, so they went inside the St. Patrick's Cathedral to get warm. Michelle was also fond of visiting old churches, I might add that as well. A few nights later, in their room at the Earl Hotel, John recounted what seemed like an inconsequential stroll down Fifth Avenue, and he came up with the very first verse for California Dreamin'. All the leaves are brown and the sky is gray. I've been for a walk on a winter's day. I'd be safe and warm if I was in LA. Pretty much exactly what happened. John was really excited about what he'd just written. He thought he had something. He actually woke up Michelle and enthusiastically asked her to get up and help him write the rest of the song. He was on to something. He told Michelle, "You're gonna thank me someday." I'd be safe and warm. So Michelle, rubbed her eyes, she got out of bed, and John proceeded to play what he'd written so far. And even in a somewhat drowsy state, the words immediately moved her. She said, "That's beautiful." And then retracing their steps, Michelle came up with the second verse, which was, "Stopped into a church, I passed along the way. Well, I got down on my knees and I pretend to pray. You know, the preacher liked the cold, he knows I'm gonna stay." So John thanked Michelle. She went back to bed, she fell asleep, and she just had no idea that the song was about to change their lives for good. Michelle confessed that the next day John told her after living with the second verse that, she'd written, he just didn't like it. The reason John didn't care for the verse is because John didn't want to include religious references in his songs. He had an aversion to religion after being sent off to a very strict Catholic military school when he was only 7 years old, an experience that made him resent his parents. Consequently, John and Michelle planned to rewrite the verse, but then they read the lyrics out loud to some of their friends, and they really liked the verse. John couldn't think of anything better at that point, so they kept everything the way it was originally scripted. Stopped into a church, I passed along the way. The second verse was the subject of debate and commentary in a lot of other ways as well. For example, the line, "You know the preacher liked the cold," was misheard and subsequently transcribed incorrectly. Actually, the official lyric that Michelle Phillips wrote is, "The preacher lights the coals." As Michelle and John Phillips both stated, the preacher liked the cold made no sense, especially considering the lyric that followed, "He knows I'm gonna stay." Why would the preacher like the cold? Why would that be relevant in the song? They asked this incredulously. The other misheard line is a bit more comical. The four members of the Mamas and the Papas were on the road while the song was getting, massive airplay. And they were doing a sound check before a show at one time. John Phillips and Cass Elliot were singing the song when Cass suddenly stopped singing. She looked at John and she's like, "Wait, what did you just say?" "I thought the lyric was, I pretend to pray." It was actually, "and I began to pray." But Cass and lead vocalist of the song, Denny Doherty, had misheard the lyrics from the very beginning, and they sang it incorrectly on the recording and when they performed the song in concert. You can actually see the mouthing and hear the singing of the incorrect lyric in many of their live performances, such as this one. And I pretend to pray, So the new journeyman had a personal shakeup. Marshall Brickman was replaced by Denny Doherty, who was an employed tenor, and his former Mugwumps bandmate Cass Elliot joined the party from there. The newly formed quintet renamed themselves Magic Circle, but then they settled on the Mamas and the Papas. The four-part harmony of the Mamas and the Papas, just angelic. They knew that they had something special, but they needed a record deal. So Cass called up her friend Barry McGuire, who was on fire at that moment. Remember, Barry was enjoying the #1 success of his recording of P.J. Sloan's protest song, Eve of Destruction. He conveyed that he sang the lyrics of his signature version of Eve of Destruction from a crumpled piece of paper that he could barely read, and he recorded the track in one take during a morning studio session. I don't believe we're on the eve of destruction. Lou Adler, he dug the sound of the Mamas and the Papas, so he signed them to Dunhill Records, and he paid them a whopping $1,500. He slipped him a $100 bill in the studio as a down payment for that. Now, as we continue to break down this classic hit, I do want to thank our sponsor, Zenni Eyewear, the glasses I always wear on here. With so much variety and a price point that will blow your mind, Zenni is the only choice for your eyewear needs. Click on our info button right up here to get up to 80% off regular retail prices and to go and design your own perfect look. You're gonna love it. Check it out today. So the first order of business for the Mamas and the Papas was to sing backup vocals on Barry McGuire's forthcoming LP, This Precious Time. Another pivotal break for the band that Barry had facilitated. He actually introduced him to Lou Adler as well. Singing the background vocals for Barry's record really helped form that classic sound of the Mamas and the Papas, so there's that as well. As Barry recalled and said, it really came together for them at that point. Musician, songwriter extraordinary P.F. Sloan called the recording sessions for California Dreamin' magical. He's one of the members of the LA Wrecking Crew that was hired to perform the instrumental section of this song. It was Sloan that came up with the guitar intro for California Dreamin', along with a guitar track for the song's melody. And that guitar intro is perfect. It really sets the song off right. As Sloan tells it though, no one really liked the song. It was really only 3 or 4 chords at this point. So Sloan went to John Phillips with an idea to borrow riffs from the Ventures' 1960 version of the instrumental Walk, Don't Run. Sloan asked Phillips if he had heard the Ventures, to which Phillips responded, "We're from New York, man. We don't listen to surf music." So actually the plan was for California Dreamin' to be the second single from This Precious Time. It was Barry McGuire's follow-up to Eve of Destruction. But since the Mamas and the Papas had been signed to Dunhill Records by Lou Adler, they needed material for their debut record, so John asked Barry for a little favor. Instead of California Dreamin' being the second single from Barry's new album, he asked Barry if they could just put the song on the Mamas and the Papas record. And Barry was like, "Yeah, sure, John. You wrote the song, it's your tune, man. You do it." What Barry didn't know, though, is that John and Lou Adler would completely erase Barry from the song altogether. The Mamas and the Papas sang the prominent backup vocals on California Dreamin' with Barry delivering the lead vocals, but if you haven't heard Barry's version of the song, you're going to be taken aback. The backup vocals are wonderfully familiar because you've heard the song so many times, but Barry's rough, gritty vocal, it's kind of strange. His style translated perfectly for the ideology of Eve of Destruction, for sure, but not really for the yearning sentiment of California Dreamin'.
California dreaming on such a winter's day.
Not long after Barry agreed to let the Mamas and the Papas have California Dreamin' for the band's debut, John completely wiped Barry's vocals from the recording. He just wasn't comfortable with Barry's voice on his song, actually from the very first moment. John kept the instrumental track intact, including the glorious background vocals, and replaced the lead vocals with a great performance by Denny Doherty.
Well, I got down on my knees, and I pretended to pray.
Another part of the original recording of California Dreamin' that neither John nor Lou cared for was the harmonica bridge that was played by, again, Barry McGuire. So John knew he wanted to get rid of the harmonica, but he didn't feel that a guitar solo was the right move right there either. So he walked out of the studio and he went down the hall and he asked jazz player Bud Shank, who also played the sax, to play some kind of brass solo for the song's bridge. So Bud went into the recording room and listened to the hole in the track that John wanted him to fill up. So Bud thought an alto flute was the right call, given the melancholy feel of California Dreamin'. An alto flute is larger than your standard C flute and can drop into a much lower register. This is what Bud imagined would be perfect for California Dreamin'. So it's been said that after listening to the instrumental track, Bud grabbed his alto flute and he played the solo in a single take. He didn't mess around. It's another dose of magic that made this song come to life in the studio. So the debut for the Mamas and the Papas was not actually California Dreamin', even though it's such a magical song. It was the single Go Where You Want to Go. It's also composed by John Phillips. The song had a limited release and fell flat for the band, though.
You gotta go where you wanna go and do what you wanna do.
It was actually rescued by the Fifth Dimension in 1967, who scored their first pop single with this tune. I think it went to number 16 on the Billboard Hot 100. After their lead single fell, it was all about California Dreamin'. But that single started off so slowly, it looked like it was going to be a similar fate to Go Where You Want to Go. They were kind of desperate here. But the fortunes changed for the Mamas and the Papas when a DJ in Boston, of all places, trusted his gut and he believed California Dreamin' was going to be a smash hit, just waiting to happen. One would think that LA or another California market would break the song, but the song got little attention in the Golden State at first. It really broke out the East Coast, actually. California Dreamin' entered the Billboard Hot 100 in January of '66, and it steadily climbed to number 4. It was on the Hot 100 for well over 4 months. The song's endurance made it the number 1 single for the Billboard year and the survey 1966.
California dreamin', on such a winter's day.
When California Dreamin' captured the hearts of listeners around the world, total madness set in. As Denny Doherty described the aftermath, it was like the moon was full every single night. The Mamas and the Papas, John Phillips, Michelle Phillips, Danny Doherty, and Cass Elliot became a supergroup before there was such a term. Their debut LP, If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, soared to #1 on the US album chart, and in just over 2 years, the Mamas and the Papas had 10 top 40 hits, including their #1 follow-up to California Dreamin', Monday, Monday.
Monday morning, it was all I hoped it would be.
The 4 band members jumped into a life of excess from there, where drugs and alcohol completely consumed them. It was sex, drugs, and rock and roll for sure. The band's drug use was so heavy, they were always exhausted and they could barely perform their instruments. They'd run out of money and then stop the binging, but when a new royalty check arrived, the madness just resumed. Michelle and Denny had an affair. This led to Michelle being fired, and fans were so upset about her being fired, she was rehired immediately. And then there was the dangerous diets that Mama Cass went on. At one point, she lost 110 pounds, but her body never recovered from the trauma. The Mamas and the Papas, they seemed to be on a collision course the moment the California Dreamin' took off. It's no wonder they broke up in just 1968. I mean, they did reunite for a short time in '71, but the magic was all gone. In 1974, Cass Elliot died of a heart attack. John Phillips, the domineering yet gifted leader of the Mamas and the Papas, called himself the Wolf King. He actually used the nickname for the title of his first solo record, John the Wolf King of LA in 1970.
Genevieve lay dreaming on my ceiling.
John's drug addiction was so out of control. In 1981, he was convicted of drug trafficking. John died of heart failure in 2001. Denny Doherty also embarked on an unsuccessful solo career. He did some acting. He produced an off-Broadway musical production called Dream a Little Dream. It was based on the turbulent history of the Mamas and the Papas. Kidney failure took Danny's life in 2007. Michelle Phillips divorced John in 1969. During their very adversarial divorce, John once bitterly said to Michelle that she would never ride in a limo again. She also famously ate a banana on stage when they performed California Dreamin', so there's that. Michelle, the lone survivor of the Mamas and the Papas, had a daughter with her late ex-husband when China Phillips was born in '68. China, of course, one of the 3 vocalists of the pop trio Wilson Phillips, who had many #1 hits. Like Danny Doherty, Michelle too turned to acting following the breakup of the Mamas and the Papas. She actually landed parts in various films and TV shows, most notably playing the role of Ann Matheson on Knots Landing.
He told you to get lost. But he must have been thrilled to see his niece. Oh, he was.
Michelle Phillips may be the last surviving member of the Mamas and the Papas, but there is one more person standing in the saga of California Dreamin'. That would be one Barry McGuire. Barry was pissed, understandably pissed, when John Phillips betrayed him and erased him completely from California Dreamin'. After all, it was Barry that connected John and his bandmate to Lou Adler in the first place, which is why they got their record deal. He encouraged Lou to hire them to sing backup on his own album and got him a label deal at Dunhill Records. Instead, Barry's version of California Dreamin' ended as a deep cut on a forgettable LP that went nowhere. John Phillips may have intended to get rid of any trace of Barry McGuire's vocal when he revamped California Dreamin' for the Mamas and the Papas, but he missed the spot. Actually, if you put on headphones and listen closely to the left track on the version of California Dreamin' that's found on If You Can Believe Your Eyes and Ears, you can actually hear Barry's rugged original vocal. Barry McGuire didn't make it back on the pop chart after Eva Destruction. Do you think that California Dreamin' would have been a hit with Barry's vocal? Let me know below. Let's talk about it. Barry, too, did some acting, including a year as a cast member of the groundbreaking Broadway musical Hair. In 1971, Barry became a born-again Christian and is regarded as pioneering as a singer-songwriter of contemporary Christian music, actually. California Dreamin' has been covered hundreds of times. The most recognized renditions include versions by Jose Feliciano, The Carpenters, Bobby Womack, America, The Beach Boys, and German DJ Freischwimmer, who made a tropical house version of the song that reached the top of the Billboard Dance Club charts back in the day.
California dreaming, such a winter's day.
It's remarkable how an innocent little song about a homesick teenager from California, walking down the streets of Manhattan in the snowfall, evolved into such an iconic anthem. The extraordinary vocal harmonies performed by the Mamas and the Papas caught the ear of listeners when they heard California Dreamin' on the radio. But the song connected with the audience in a way that the co-authors, I don't think, could have imagined. To the counterculture movement of the mid-60s. California Dreamin' wasn't a song about missing the warmth of California. It was a song about escaping to an idyllic, perhaps mythical place even. A place that would bring peace, beauty, love, and happiness to an emotionally bruised society. What a song. Hey, leave us a comment about the Mamas and the Papas and California Dreamin'. What do you think about them deleting Barry's vocal? What do you think about his vocal on it? Would it have been a hit? Let's have a great discussion about such a melancholy song, such a beautiful song. And let's talk about the Mamas and the Papas and celebrate them below. If you like our content, we do invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you as part of our community here. Until next time, 3 chords and the truth, my friends.